Hi, today we will explain the storyline of the movie Becky, which was released in 2024. Okay, let's get straight to the story. Husband and wife Joy and Greg have just moved into a new house. The neighborhood around them looks friendly and modern. Their own house looks nice and Joy likes it. Shortly thereafter, the neighbors came to greet them and give them a welcome gift. The two couples who came were Wilma and George, also Kesha and Brandon. They chatted for a while to find out about their new neighbors. Joy said that they had moved from Los Angeles. Shortly thereafter, the neighbors went home, having thoroughly enjoyed the champagne. Shortly after, a woman named Becky arrived, also a neighbor, but Becky was single. She then made brief acquaintance with Joy and Greg, not forgetting to invite them to dinner together as an introductory gift, considering she didn't bring a gift. Greg gladly accepted the invitation, but his wife didn't really like seeing Greg flirting with Becky. But Greg argued that he was just being friendly. Over dinner, Joy and Greg talked about what they would do tomorrow.
I hang my clothes up and
The next morning, Greg started the day by jogging around the complex, where he ran into Becky and chatted for a while, then ran together. Meanwhile, Joy was getting ready to leave for the office. She peeked out the window and saw that her husband seemed familiar with Becky. Joy brought up their familiarity, but Greg insisted that they had only met in the middle of the street. Here, Joy still believed in her husband. After that, Joy left. In the evening, after Joy returned from work, they talked before going to sleep. Joy talked about her day at her new workplace over dinner. Joy said that all her coworkers were very nice. Most of them were young and eager to learn. Joy was also grateful that Greg had cooked dinner for her today, while tomorrow it would be Joy's turn to cook, but she had to go to Atlanta for a few days to meet a potential client. Greg didn't want to be outdone. He also had good news for Joy. He said he would take the police agility test on Friday. If he passed, and he was sure he would proceed to the interview stage, at which point he admitted to feeling very nervous, but Joy assured him that he would definitely get through it. Friday arrived. Greg passed Becky, who was out for a morning run. He asked her why she hadn't seen Greg this morning. Greg said he had to attend a test. Becky then wished Greg good luck. Long story short, Greg arrived at the test site. The first test required him to run 1.5 miles in 15 minutes. The officers will record the time they take each time they complete a lap, and participants must state their name each time they pass an officer. If they pass the test, they will be called in for an interview. That day, Greg passed the agility test and went on to an interview with Sergeant Armstrong. He didn't expect Greg to pass because he saw him almost give up earlier. In this interview, it was learned that Greg had previously served for 10 years in the Army. He admitted that he hadn't run for a long time, so his performance was not optimal. Armstrong seemed to like Greg's personality and would check his background first over the next few days. He would also check references and dig up information about Greg from the neighbors. If Greg passed, Armstrong would contact him again. Meanwhile, at home, Becky tried to get acquainted with her new neighbors. She sent a text to Joy and invited them to hang out together. However, Joy quickly replied that she couldn't because she had to go out of town for a few days. Understanding that, Becky smiled happily, especially because she seemed to like Joy's husband. That evening, Brandon stopped by Greg's house and invited him to watch a game on TV while chatting. As it turned out, Greg had invited Brandon for a drink and a chat while getting to know his new complex. Coincidentally, Brandon's wife, Kesha, was also at the salon, so he was happy to have a friend to chat with. In the middle of the conversation, suddenly the doorbell rang. Greg saw Becky at the door, claiming to want to meet Joy. However, Greg said Joy was not at home. He invited Becky to join him and Brandon, but Becky didn't want to be a bother. After Becky left, Greg returned to chatting with Brandon. Brandon bragged that Becky seemed to like Greg. He knew Becky tried to flirt with him once or twice. However, Greg dismissed the thought because he didn't want any problems with his household. Greg also asked when exactly Becky moved into this complex, and Brandon said not long ago, maybe only a few months before he and Joy moved here. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Joy was busy in a meeting discussing marketing strategies with her client, the owner of a fashion brand that was going to expand into other markets outside of Atlanta. After that, Joy contacted her husband to ask how he was doing. Greg also said that he and Brandon had hung out at home while watching a game while Joy was away the previous day. Joy expressed her concern about Becky, but Greg assured Joy that he and Becky were not having an affair. Here, Joy still tries to believe in her husband. The next night, Greg chatted with Becky, who was smoking alone in front of the house. Unbeknownst to them, Brandon and Kesha were watching their interaction from behind the window.
I'll let you off with a warning if you share.
Kesha felt something was different about the body language of the two, but Brandon asked Kesha not to interfere. In the middle of the conversation, Greg pointed to an unoccupied house. Becky then invited him to try out the swimming pool behind the house. Greg, who was trying to apply to be a police officer, was of course hesitant because he thought it was against the law, but Becky persuaded him, remembering that no one lived in the house now. Finally, Greg was persuaded and followed Becky to the pool. When they got to the pool, Becky invited him to swim. Greg panicked because Becky casually changed her clothes and went swimming. Becky again invited him to swim with her, but Greg tried hard not to slide in. But Greg was finally fooled by Becky's trick of pretending to drown until Greg intended to save her. After knowing that Becky was just acting drowned, Greg was annoyed and left Becky alone in the pool. The next day, Becky met with Dr. Robinson, her psychiatric therapist. They discussed any developments Becky had felt since their last meeting. Becky said that she had stopped drinking alcohol for a year and had not experienced any triggers for her trauma. In the middle of the session, Becky also admitted that she had met a man. She made up a story that they met in the pool and that the man tried to save her from drowning. Returning from counseling, Becky greeted Joy, who had just returned from being out of town for a few days. While making small talk, Becky invited Joy to have coffee with her sometime to celebrate Joy's success. But Joy rejected the idea because she had a severe allergy to coffee. However, she was grateful for Becky's hospitality, and Becky insisted on inviting them to dinner at her house tomorrow. She felt she still owed her and Greg a welcome gift, and Joy accepted the invitation. Meanwhile, Greg had also cooked and prepared a gift to welcome Joy home. While resting together, Joy said that Becky had just invited the two of them to dinner at her house. At first, Greg intended to refuse and just wanted to spend time with Joy at home, but Joy said Becky was a bit pushy. She felt bad about refusing her, so they finally promised to be there for a short while. That night, Joy and Greg went to Becky's house. They brought a bottle of wine. Not long after, Becky appeared at the door and smiled widely to welcome her guests. After a moment's pleasantries, Becky took them to the dining room. While enjoying the food, Joy and Becky chatted. Then Joy and Greg praised Becky's food, which turned out to be delicious. At that time, Greg was quieter than usual. Becky told him that her high school boyfriend was black and had a very close relationship with her mother. So that's where Becky learned to cook. After finishing eating, Becky offered them a glass of wine. Joy continued to try to get to know Becky better, asking her about her background and work. Hesitantly, Becky said that since her husband's death, she no longer worked. So all this time, she had only relied on her inheritance. Joy felt bad and expressed her condolences. Becky then changed the subject and offered them her dessert. However, Joy chose to try Becky's homemade pie next time because she had to hurry home and felt a little dizzy. Joy then asked for permission to go to the bathroom for a while before going home. While Joy was in the bathroom, Becky approached Greg, who had been quiet for a while, and asked him why. Greg admitted that they had to keep their distance for a while, and Becky promised that what had happened between them the other day would be a secret. Greg then apologized if Becky misunderstood his hospitality, but he loved Joy and didn't want to ruin their marriage. However, Becky felt she couldn't just forget about Greg, especially after spending intimate moments together in the pool. However, Greg did not remember doing that with Becky. He then accused Becky of being crazy because he was sure they had not done anything. Not long after, Joy came out of the bathroom and said goodbye to Becky's house. After returning from Becky's house, Joy still didn't expect that Becky was a good cook. Greg couldn't figure out how quickly Joy changed her mind about Becky, even though she didn't seem to like Becky before. Now, Joy seemed willing to be good friends with Becky. The next day, Becky suddenly snuck into the kitchen of Greg's house. Greg suddenly kicked her out. However, Becky kept trying to flirt with Greg and said that she just wanted to make breakfast for the two of them. Becky insisted that they had the same feelings for each other. Still, Greg didn't feel that way and said that she had made a mistake. However, because Becky was difficult to talk to, Greg told her to stay away from him and Joy. But Becky felt that it was impossible, especially since she and Joy were now good friends. In the end, after some effort, Greg managed to drive Becky away. The next day, Becky went back to see Dr. Robinson, but this time Becky's mood seemed bad. The therapist said that they had to seriously continue healing Becky's childhood trauma, specifically when Becky's parents left her alone at home. However, Becky cut their conversation short and talked about something else, namely the man Becky was approaching. From the conversation, Dr. Robinson learned that Becky was cheating with someone else's husband. But Becky argued and thought that they were both in love with each other, not just cheating. She didn't want the man's wife to get in the way of their relationship, and she felt she had to get rid of her. Hearing this confession, Dr. Robinson became worried that she would do something desperate. If Becky intended to hurt the man's wife, she should report this to the authorities. However, Becky dismissed her therapist's concerns and said she wouldn't do that. Becky then cut their session and asked for permission to go to the toilet. Without suspicion, the doctor allowed Becky to go to the toilet. However, not long after Becky returned, and with all her might, she strangled Dr. Robinson until she was breathless with her headband. After that, Becky took Dr. Robinson's practice notes and just left. The next day, Sergeant Armstrong from the police came to Becky, who was relaxing in front of the house. He wanted to interview Becky about her neighbor, Greg, as part of the police academy candidate background check.
You excited about the first day of work tomorrow?
Just then, Greg came to the front of the house and greeted Armstrong. Becky then suggested that they continue the interview inside the house because the weather was getting hot. Unsuspectingly, Armstrong followed Becky inside. Becky then offered him a drink, and Armstrong began his questions. He asked how often Becky and Greg's family interacted. Becky said their relationship was fine and that they had just had dinner together some time ago. However, when Armstrong asked how the dinner was, Becky pretended to cry, claiming that Greg had abused her when Joy was in the bathroom. Armstrong asked if Greg threatened or hurt Becky. However, Becky said no. Greg is a good guy, and she didn't mean to cause him any trouble. Shortly thereafter, Armstrong said goodbye to Becky, and Becky could only laugh smugly at what she had just said. On his way back from Becky's house, Armstrong ran into Greg on the road. Greg felt very optimistic about his fate, however. Armstrong shattered his optimism. Armstrong emphasized that the Houston police force holds very tightly to moral and ethical values. Becky's testimony about what Greg did to her was inappropriate and did not meet the criteria for the candidate they were looking for. Thus, Greg failed to enter the police academy. After the conversation, Greg went to Becky's house and asked her for clarification. But Becky pretended to be stupid and didn't care. She kept tempting Greg to leave Joy, but because Greg kept rejecting her, Becky decided to take extreme measures. At night, she sneaked into the kitchen of Greg's house and deliberately put a capsule of caffeine in Joy's thermos. Joy once said she was severely allergic to caffeine and that it could kill her. The next morning, Joy coughed so badly in the office that she was out of breath, and a few hours later, Greg visited her in the hospital. A few days later, Greg and Joy were shocked to find Kesha and Brandon dead at home due to leaking gas. After that, in the middle of the night, Becky threatened Greg to divorce Joy or she would do something desperate. It turned out that Becky wasn't messing around. When Joy and Greg came home from their outing together, they found their house in shambles. Greg then revealed to Joy that Becky had done all this. He told her how he and Becky had spent the night together, but nothing more. Joy was furious, but she was even more furious with Becky. She hurried over to Becky's house to talk to her, but Becky didn't open the door. They just walked in. Becky was waiting for them upstairs. Joy and Greg were very surprised to see that several of their neighbors had been killed there. Joy and Becky ended up fighting and hitting each other with their bare hands. Becky was knocked down by Joy's punch, but she got up immediately. Becky struggled again until Joy was able to put up a final fight. In the end, Becky died.